Welcome to Once Upon a Coin, documenting the ongoing history of blockchain and cryptocurrency. And as always, I'm your storyteller, Jason Cassidy. Some episodes hit harder than others, and with today's episode, well, it packs a real punch. This is a tale about one of the most important people in the history of cryptocurrency that almost nobody knows about. And this person was so well respected that even Satoshi Nakamoto would go to them for advice. Batman had Robin, Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen, and the pseudonymous creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, well, he had a great sidekick too, and that's exactly who we're going to be looking at right now. This is the story of Hal Finney.
Sun cast a shadow, a digital line is coming over the mountain and over your mind. Go down your Bitcoin, hang on for the ride. We're moving into the future, one block at a time. We're moving into the future, one block at a time.
Our tale begins more than half a century ago when on May 4th, 1956, Harold Thomas Finney II was born in Coalinga, California. He had a fascination with technology from a young age, especially computers. And this interest eventually manifested itself in the form of an engineering degree that he acquired at the California Institute of Technology. In 1978, a year prior to graduation, Finney secured a job with a consulting firm that was working for Mattel. They wanted help designing what would later become the Intellivision, a home gaming console system that would be able to feature arcade-style games. Although his first assignment was actually working on cash register software, Finney would eventually be moved over to the much more prestigious and important job of working on various parts of the Intellivision system. His first task? Improving the quality of the sound effects, which were quite primitive at the time. He enjoyed a lot of success in this endeavor, which led to more opportunities for him to work on various video games. Before Hal knew it, he had accumulated a ton of invaluable experience in the rapidly growing industry of arcade and home console games. Games weren't the only thing that Hal worked on either. He ended up creating a spectrometer for Bosch and Lohm, as well as developing some pretty creative camera control software for a Hollywood special effects house. All these opportunities came via the consulting firm he had started with years prior, APH Technology Consultants. He stayed with them until 1986 before moving on to other interests, but it's fair to say that his time at the consulting firm ended up playing a pivotal role in setting up his life for what would come next. By the early 1990s, Hal's passion for encryption and privacy eventually led him to crossing paths with Phil Zimmermann. Zimmermann was no slouch when it came to privacy or encryption himself, as he would later go on to create PGP, or Pretty Good Privacy, an encryption standard that is still used to this very day. PGP was developed in 1991, and Hal Finney was one of the main characters working alongside Phil Zimmermann on it during this time period. Zimmermann eventually formed the PGP Corporation in 1996, and Hal immediately joined it, continuing his efforts on creating a way for humanity to communicate privately. Zimmermann was part of the growing cypherpunk movement, which was a pushback against governmental overreach as it pertained to personal freedoms and the right to communicate and transact privately. Given what the next phase of Hal Finney's life would consist of, it's clear to see that his involvement with Zimmermann and PGP greatly influenced his thinking towards decentralization and anonymity. By the early 2000s, Hal was completely immersed within the world of privacy and technology. He clearly saw that humanity would need a way to ensure that these powerful software tools that were being created would be used to help people opposed to abuse them. He felt so passionate about this topic that in 2004, it led him to creating Reusable Proof of Work, with the inspiration behind this innovation being the need to have effective ways of combating email spam. The historical importance of what I just said cannot be understated. In Finney's system, a token could be transferred and then reused, thus representing one of the first attempts at creating a digital currency using cryptographic principles. In this sense, reusable proof of work was a precursor to what we know today as cryptocurrency.
We will next hear from Hal Finney.
I want to prove to you that I know a message that hashes to a given hash value using a SHA-1 hash.
One of the ways that Hal kept up to date with all the happenings within the cypherpunk community over the years was the mailing lists that existed. In 2008, he saw an email pop into his inbox discussing a new project called Bitcoin, and its creator went by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. Hal was instantly taken in by the creation that was also using a proof of work system to secure the network. He reached out to Satoshi regarding the white paper that he had just read, and the two hit it off instantly, becoming fast friends.
Did we just become best friends? Yep!
He wanted to help Satoshi with Bitcoin as he understood the system well enough. And perhaps more importantly, he truly believed in what Bitcoin represented, which was financial privacy and freedom. From here on out, the two worked closely together when it came to Bitcoin. Whether that was Hal assisting with development or testing out new features or changes that Satoshi had made. For something magical like Bitcoin to actually happen, all the required elements had to be perfectly in place. Finney's past with technology, especially encryption, coupled with his belief in privacy, made him the ideal candidate to be working with Satoshi this early on when everything was very experimental and unknown.
The funny thing about Hal Finney is that Hal actually deserves a lot of credit that is given to a lot of other people in the Bitcoin space. Adam Back, for example, gets credit for inventing proof of work. Hal Finney, he implemented what was called RPOW, and it was actually an implemented piece of code. And so Hal deserves credit for being the real inventor of proof of work, in my opinion. There was an interesting conversation between Hal and Satoshi about the nature of proof of work. So Hal really liked the idea of deterministic consensus, basically using cryptography to make sure that the block at the front of the line remains deterministically the front. There are no race conditions. There's no risk of orphans or reorgs or that kind of thing. Satoshi made it very clear why he wanted race conditions. He wanted a very capitalistic bent in the nature of consensus. Now, it's funny because Hal talked about this in relation to this notion of home compute. He wanted people to altruistically contribute to Bitcoin in some way. So it's funny, Satoshi also gets credit for being this big libertarian, but the only time he ever used the word libertarian is in contrast to Hal talking about the need for altruism. Satoshi's like, no, we're going to talk about libertarianism here, and essentially why we need competition and capitalism here in the game of consensus. Hal was obviously forced to relent, but Satoshi also relented to some of Hal's advice. So Hal, with his professional experience, was the guy that suggested to Satoshi Nakamoto that Bitcoin have a 1 megabyte block size limit. The anecdote, this is from Ray Dillinger, who goes by Bear. Ray likes to talk about how they had all agreed, they had all discussed this, and how the 1 megabyte block size limit would be gotten rid of when the network came to a level of maturity where it was running out of data centers and that kind of thing. And that really hasn't happened, actually. So even 15 years on, this is still a conversation going on in Bitcoin. So we still feel the ripples of Hal in the Bitcoin conversation here.
It's really hard to put into words how important Finney's involvement with Bitcoin was into ensuring its success in the early days, but here's one such example. So much respect for Hal Finney did Satoshi hold that the two of them became entwined in some financial and technological history via the simple act of sending a transaction. On January 12, 2009, Finney, who had downloaded the Bitcoin client software the moment it was released, was now ready to help Satoshi with a quick test. Having now set up a wallet, the next logical step was to get some Bitcoin, and that's exactly what happened. Satoshi sent Hal 10 Bitcoin that day, becoming the first ever recorded Bitcoin transaction in history. This took place in block 170, becoming one of the most important Bitcoin blocks ever. Hal also made history just a few days earlier when he was credited with mining the first block outside of Satoshi Nakamoto himself, laying claim to block 78. Everything had seemingly fallen into place for Finney at this point. He had found a movement in Bitcoin that connected with him on both a technical and, more importantly, a philosophical level. Plus, Satoshi respected Hal, and Hal respected Satoshi. They had a really good thing going here. But sometimes fate has different plans for our lives. Plans that take us in directions we could never imagine. This is what happened with Hal, as by the time August of 2009 came, he received some life-changing news. He had been diagnosed with ALS, or amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, better known as Lou Gehrig disease, which is a neurological disorder that affects a person's motor skills. In essence, ALS causes progressive degeneration of the nerve cells in the spinal cord and brain. The condition is fatal, so once Hal found out about it, he had some big decisions to make on how he was going to be spending the rest of his remaining time. And that decision was to continue doing what he loved, helping develop Bitcoin, no matter what obstacles he faced. And sure enough, despite the growing struggles with his body slowly shutting down over the next few years, Finney continued to work on Bitcoin. His passion for seeing it succeed for the right reasons is clearly evident in his postings on the legendary Bitcoin Talk forum, where he was accepted as one of the early pioneers of the technology. And all those Bitcoin he had mined came in handy as his family sold them to help pay for his increasing medical costs. Eventually, Hal was limited to a wheelchair and a breathing tube. However, he always maintained his upbeat attitude throughout his battle with ALS. Hal worked relentlessly as time was running out, going so far as having a commercial eye tracker system installed to help control his computer once he could no longer move his body. His fight with the disease came to an end on August 28, 2014. And as per his wishes, his body was cryopreserved at the Elcor Life Extension Foundation. This was a devastating loss for the entire industry, losing one of its top supporters and contributors far too early into what was becoming an incredibly successful financial experiment. He will forever be remembered as one of the most important figures in the history of Bitcoin, in part due to his uncanny ability to see the future before it came to pass. Heck, he even predicted the advent of NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, a full 30 years before they were created. Perhaps the biggest compliment to Hal's character comes from Satoshi, who was notoriously private and elusive, choosing to work closely with only a few select souls. Hal Finney was one of them, if not the person that Satoshi trusted the most to help fine-tune Bitcoin all those years ago, to ensure it became the financial revolution that it represents to all of us today. Rest in peace, Hal. I hope you enjoyed today's stroll down memory lane. Until next time, have fun and enjoy life, my friends. I'll be back soon with another incredible story to tell you.